I end up in a scenario where I needed to, probably get a part-time job or do something. And I ended up at Bank of America. And it was how you go from where I was to Bank of America. I'll never know, but I did. It was through an employment agency. And as I was working there, I started to see things like with their computers and with the way they were handling your phone calls and stuff. And I was like, that's not right. You don't say that. You don't say, can you wait a minute? It's no, please hold, or, 1 moment, please. You never use a 4-letter word. Hold. 4-letter words are not used in contact centers. And so I started questioning that. And they said, well, maybe you need to go from fraud to over here and snoop out this stuff. And next thing you know, I'm playing on a Lucent technology system and putting in laptops and computers and setting up servers and doing call flows. And it just kind of came out.
Hey, contact center, customer experience friends, welcome to another episode of Contact Center Journeys. I'm super excited to be bringing you my guest, Shellie Plymale, who is the CEO of Plymale Enterprise Groups. Shellie, welcome to the pod.
Hi, thanks for having me, Fred.
Absolutely. So Shellie is an executive consultant with over 30 years of experience in transforming contact center operations. She specializes in customer and employee experience. It delivers high impact vendor agnostic solutions from omni-channel strategies to performance optimization. With a Six Sigma background and leadership in APAC consulting for NICE Systems, the CX1 platform, she brings deep expertise to drive measurable results for businesses worldwide. As always, the intent of contact center journeys, though, is to inspire the next generation of CX and contact center professionals through sharing the stories of those that came up in the industry. Who doesn't love a great origin story? We really here want to change the narrative, though, that contact center and customer service jobs have no future. We all personally have met entrepreneurs in this industry, executives, technology people, who started out as agents or even junior level leaders, and we really try to celebrate those stories here. There are never any sales pitches. That's not what we're here for. The content is free. You can use it. Feel free to cut it up, share it with your teams, whatever you want to do. All we ever ask is tag us when you do share it out. And also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us all on LinkedIn, including our guests. So Shellie, without any further ado, tell us how you got into this crazy world of contact centers.
By accident, or maybe design from my parents. Let's start there. Sorry, my ear thing is moving a little bit. So let me just tell you my heritage. My dad worked for the Bell companies, started out at Western Electric back in the 70s, and has always been a switch engineer, which I didn't know what that was growing up, of course. And I didn't know that he knew all about, he was in the CO world, central offices, dealing with all of that stuff. So that was my dad. My mom, who happens to be, she came later in my life when I was a teenager. My mom had worked at a contact center. And back then it wasn't called a contact center. It was called a telephone answering service. It called Available Communications in St. Louis. And I was 17 years old and she needed some help. So she made me come in and learn how to do this thing of answering phones and literally writing down messages. And I had 4 phones on my desk with 4 lines on each phone. And we had this wooden thing in the center where we spinned it to get the customer's information when the line rang, to know what to say and to write down their message and then stick it back in. That's how I started. Really old days. I'm surprised they weren't dials, at least they were push buttons. So you had to pick up the phones and work all these all at the same time. So she grew up and got this thing in their service. And after I graduated from high school, I went to school. And I'll talk about the thing they got in the service. So I went to school to be a nurse. I wanted to work in surgery. I didn't want to be around people that were awake and sick. I wanted them asleep, and so I could dig in their bodies, or at least be part of that. I thought that was very interesting. And at the same time, I was still working for my mom, making money, and she, what I could make as I was going to school. And they got this new system in her office called Eve. And it was long time ago, became Amtelco. But it was Eve back then, and she used it. And what it was now we're on a computer, and we could get 20 calls at the same time. And this little green and black screen would pop up and tell you how to answer the calls and what you had to do with them. And it was a lot of things like cable TV back in the days, doctor offices, whatever. Still it has, but you had to work literally 20 calls at a time and had to keep a low AHT. Skill-based routing is what it was, the very first thing. Before they called it skill-based routing, remember, it was look-ahead attempts, right? At the same time, my dad's now working for what became, I think it was Lucid at the time. So they had changed and diverted due to the Bell workout, components, and was at Lucid. And I was starting to get interested in this stuff. I was like, this is really cool. But I was still going to school to be a nurse. So in my third year of nursing school, I had a little snot-nosed doctor who was a resident give a medication, and I had just taken a test on it, and I questioned him. And he told me, you are just a nurse. You are never to question me. You do exactly what we say. And that was standard back in the 80s, the mid 80s. We're talking about early 90s, where you took orders. Nurses nowadays pretty much give them. I mean, they're the closest ones. But back then it wasn't like that. And I just looked at him, and I went to meet with my advisor, and I said, this is not the job for me. And so I left, and my mom says, do you want to come work for me some more? Oh, sure. Why not? Then I got married, had kids, and her system grew, right? And there came a point, and it was 1992, when she started remote workers, where she could bring the system to the house, and you had to dial your phone and put it on this little receiver so that it connected to the server back in their office, and I could get calls at home. So when it snowed and things, I was filling in for everyone else. Now we have work from home agents, a hybrid. There's some inside, there's some from home, all did the same thing. Quality, the whole 9 yards. And so that was my childhood. And I'm listening to my dad talk about his stuff with her, because they're talking about the switches and everything. And I'm like, I'm having nothing to do with that. 10 years later, 10 years later, I end up, my Teams is trying to open. Sorry. I end up in a scenario where I needed to, probably get a part-time job or do something. And I ended up at Bank of America. And it was how you go from where I was to Bank of America. I'll never know, but I did. It was through an employment agency. And as I was working there, I started to see things like with their computers and with the way they were handling your phone calls and stuff. And I was like, that's not right. You don't say that. You don't say, can you wait a minute? It's no, please hold, or, 1 moment, please. You never use a 4-letter word. Hold. 4-letter words are not used in contact centers. And so I started questioning that. And they said, well, maybe you need to go from fraud to over here and snoop out this stuff. And next thing you know, I'm playing on a Lucent technology system and putting in laptops and computers and setting up servers and doing call flows. And it just kind of came out. It was just natural. And back then I was blessed. And I'm going to say this because you don't get this joy anymore, to be able to test out my ideas in production. And I was like, that was BSR. And I said, we're not doing this right. We should keep it here before we send it across the country for at least 5 seconds and allow the agents to answer the phone because calls were bouncing back and forth. And I started doing traces on these calls to say, how does this really work? Reading the manual. The first one that I read was the Definity G3, which my dad happened to be the engineer on. So I started asking him questions. And the next thing you know, I've got all the original manuals and books, and it just comes out. I just understood it. So when it came to routing, I would put hats on my kids at the time. I had 4 of them, and would put little steps on the floor and ask them to do walks for me so I could see how the calls were going to run, who was going to run into what was going to happen, and completely changed the way the National Helpline worked at Bank of America and the way that they did performance measurement, because they were, I learned how to get into the weeds of the data, very much so, and prove that what they were doing wasn't actually benefiting the customer or the agents. And it was all about doing both of that, and then moved up from just that little group to customer service, the big world. And all of a sudden they bring along Genesis. And I was like, why are you doing this? What? They don't know what they're doing. They're not new, And because I had the logic of what Avaya was doing at that time, still Lucid, right, at the bank, and I understood behind the scenes when Genesis was first coming in, it was like, how do you make these two work together? And I looked at my boss and I said, I can make them work together. They don't have to compete. And he was like, really? And I said, oh yeah, I could do that. I had no freaking clue what I was doing. I just had an idea. And he said, okay, how much are you willing to bet on this? I said, my job. And he goes, okay, I'll let you try it. I went home and I did some digging and read more manuals and put the kids to work on the floor and figured out that you could blend calls from 2 different systems if you use the same skill groups. And so Avaya, by delivering BSR at that, and still, at that time it did like a look ahead. It looked at everything that was going on. And I sang the song, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Right? That'd be Avaya, should I stay or should I go? That's how I would teach it. Stay here, go to this site. Genesis was routing in the air tonight, from Phil Collins a little bit. So it wasn't using history to determine where to go. It was using right then statistics. So we had to make it so that the statistics read and understood what BSR was going to do by delaying BSR by 10 seconds. So that it could see that. And the next thing you know, it was doing first in, first out. And thank God it worked, because it saved my job. And credit card services was a whole new animal at the bank. And then it went everywhere. And so that's where I started in call delivery. And then from there, I went to pretty much all the different organizations except wealth management. That was Haley's, and she still has it, Haley Griner. And I made some of my best friends there that were still friends, and got to play in the IVR, got to play in everything, got to get experience and quality, helped set up dictaphone, which became witness, which became nice, and worked on TCS. That's here. I'm going to do a little pat on the back. TCS back in the days, it used to, look for workforce when it would go and determine how many agents to put out. They counted 1 agent in every queue, no matter how many skills or hunt groups they had on them. And I developed a report that showed how you could do percentage of agents and then actually have them sitting in a primary group and then their subsidiary skills. So you weren't booking one person for each group. You were doing a percentage of how many calls they can take or would take based on prioritization and their ability, right? So you would do their level and their capabilities, and began to help teach that at the bank with a contact center operations certification program. So it was very fun. And those actual reports still exist today. They don't have my name. They have my initials in them, but they are 3 reports that are run that actually pulls out all the data that divides agents into different cues and skill groups now. So when you see 1.35 agents somewhere, that's why. And so after going and playing in all the things, workforce, performance measurement, quality planning, quality measurement, document management, snail mail, that real mail, email, digital. We've been doing digital transformation since they came up with pagers, so okay. And, all of it. So I had the unique pleasure of being part of a early environment of working in every pillar of a contact center, from an agent to leading a large team of consultants.
Awesome.
It was something you cannot teach in school, and they don't. It was just, and I have very close friends to this day that we all had the same experience, and we know we are blessed because you don't get that anymore.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, what a great story. So you actually started on the physical phones, with your mom,
Mm-hmm.
and you went to green screen applications.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, following up, eventually we moved to NT, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Windows server space telephony.
Yep.
So this whole
The whole
experience
thing.
really just started from you. Your mom's like, "Hey, come work, come do some work."
You have to come get a job. Yeah. You need to do something. Here you go. You're not working at the mall this weekend. Come here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's
Come
how
in.
that worked out. Yeah. And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
great, thanks. But now look at, I'm so passionate about this space, from so many different reasons. Because it's not just serving a customer. It's watching something magical happen with one person and then seeing it expand out to millions. Making a change for Mrs. Jones. Somebody once told me, you can't fix everything. And I said, no, but I can fix that one. It's like the starfish story. Kid walking down the beach and starfish are all up there, and starts throwing it back in. And the old man comes along and says, why are you throwing them back in? You're never going to save them all. He goes, no, but I saved that one. And so I always have remembered that. And if I can help fix Mrs. Jones, then Mr. Jones or somebody else is going to get that experience. And that's all that matters. And it turns to grow. And it's the same thing for the agents who nobody pays them enough. I don't care what anybody says. Haven't been one. You couldn't pay me enough to do that now. They are a unique, special group of people that need to be constantly recognized and elevated. And so employee experience is just as significant to me as customer experience. They get a mental beating, most of them, every day.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So that's my passion, is to make it better for them.
Funny enough, that's what we do here, right? Is try to
Yeah, it is.
give them some stories. So, I love it. First of all, because you and I, similar journey, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
similar. I stayed in the center side before I got into the technology side,
Mm-hmm.
and ran the centers. I went down ops. Versus getting pulled into the tech, but somebody always grabbed me on the tech side because sounds like you're the same way. Just it made
Mm-hmm.
sense for whatever reason, you know.
Yes.
I can't seem to learn Italian, although I've been trying my whole life. But you can put me in front of a telephony platform and punch down blocks and T1s and configurations, and that all just made sense to me. But
Yep.
that's how some
We
of
used
us
to
are
have
wired.
races. I used to, in a skirt, because I had to wear a skirt or dress back in those days when you had to dress up to go to work. Yeah. And we had races, punch down races. I was like, see you next week, guys. Good luck.
I do not miss
So,
those days.
yeah,
But then
I
again, I
do.
do.
I miss
Sometimes.
getting in this. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, I miss getting into the weeds because, but when I get in the weeds, I get excessively frustrated that other people don't understand where I'm coming from. And so I have learned the hard way, within the last year, that I need to stay out of the weeds and just guide and not be the doer. but to be a more of a, to impart some of that knowledge on the whys, because everybody brings a little something with them. In this world, correct me if you think differently, everything that goes around comes around. AI is not new. It's not. It's just how fast we're getting the data. I call it collective data analysis now, because you're collecting a lot of that data and analyzing it and making a decision. Turing computer did that when they tried to figure out the Enigma. It just took a little bit longer, remember?
Right. Absolutely. And I agree. So let's finish up your journey though. You got through there. Now today though, you run your own practice.
I do.
You consult. Is there how did you go from working for B of A to this? Was there?
So there was a time in there. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually got to retire from Bank of America with my years of service and my age, because I started later there. It worked out for me. I made a commitment to myself that once I've been to these certain areas within the company, that was kind of it, and I was going to be done, because then it becomes repetitious. And frustrating. There was a lot going on. I was the transition queen with card services. If they had one more acquisition, I think I was going to choke myself. So, and so I was like, it was time to get out of there. So I did. I left. I took about 6 months off and ended up at Waste Management, which got me back to Phoenix, because at a time there I was in Phoenix. I moved to Kentucky and worked 100% remote. Oh, let me go back. I've always worked remote. I very rarely was in an office, except for those first 5 years at the bank. After that, and I retired there with 18 years of service. So I've always worked remote. And when I came back to Phoenix, I worked at Waste Management, and then they had a big layoff, and I said, I'll go, because they said, we'll pay you for 6 months, or, and all of this stuff. And I had already had something else lined up. So I said, I'm out, I'll take it. And then I went to a small company, my first startup that I ever worked in. And again, I got a whole different element, because that wasn't just about writing, routing and stuff. And with Waste Management, I was pretty much doing the same thing that I was doing before, with projects, with strategic, processing, with workforce management, quality. It was the same thing. So it was, when I went to the small company, I had a whole different ballgame. Now I'm dealing with customers and providing them more solutions other than just what was inside of one infrastructure or one, entity. Now I had everything I could play with. And I did that for about 5 years, and then said, I think it's time. I'm going to take and do something on myself. And I'm going to thank the one person. You always need to have somebody in your network who is the one, right? Unbeknownst to me, my one person was Mark Brody. And Mark said to me, Shellie, you can do this on your own if you want to. I was like, no way. And he goes, let me introduce you to some people. He introduced me to Valerie McSorley. He introduced me to Darren Prine. He introduced me to Milan Batinovich, who I happened to have met in a previous role, and said, these are the people. And I said, okay. So I said I'd give it a try, and I got nervous, and NICE called me and said, hey, do you want to come do this thing in the APAC region, do that consulting thing that you do? Because again, if you go all the way back, I've been working with NICE before they were NICE. So I knew NICE, right? Been around them since the beginning pretty much. And so we went, and so I said, sure. So I did that for a good year. And unfortunately, it was during COVID, and I needed to move to Singapore, which is why I was so excited to go. But it didn't work out because of everything with COVID, and they just weren't letting anybody come there. So unfortunately, I had to depart, but it was on good terms and everything was great. So then I said, okay, now I'm going to dive in and do this thing really. And
Here we are.
5 years ago.
That's
so
awesome.
Is it scary? Every day. But it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I have thought, hey, should I go back and work for the man? I'm really not good at orders. I would rather take them from my customer who pays me to take orders and give my opinion, as opposed to somebody who says, do this, and I don't want your opinion. So I'm towards the end of my career, and now it's about giving back to others and teaching others. So that's where I am.
That's awesome.
That's how that happened. And it's scary, don't get me wrong. But if you dedicate yourself, it works. It works the way you need it to work for you. And that's the difference. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks when you're an entrepreneur. It's what you think and what works for you.
Yeah, that's a hell of a journey.
Yeah. You would think I had more wrinkles or something, maybe.
It's called good skincare. I mean, that's what it's called.
Or vodka.
Yeah, that's supposed to like make it worse, isn't it? That's what I've been told.
I guess it's like formaldehyde. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose Keith Richards is a perfect example. That guy's still alive.
Right?
Who knows how?
Mean, Hulk Hogan couldn't make it through his 70s, but, Keith Richards, look at Ozzy Osbourne. Keith Richards takes a licking and keeps on ticking. I'm telling you.
So you know what's funny is there's people that are watching this that are in the younger generation that are like, who are they talking about? Just go Google it, or ask ChatGPT.
You know what? There's good rock and roll, and then there's stuff that comes out today. That's all I can say.
All right, we won't talk about their bands or lack thereof. So let's get into the conversational piece.
Okay, let's do it.
So this season I'm kind of asking everybody pretty much the same questions because it's what everybody wants to talk about anyways. So just different ways of pulling the juice out of the experts that I get to bring on like you. So right now, what is keeping you up at night in the contact center customer experience space?
The overuse of AI.
Okay.
That keeps me up at night because everybody has. Yeah, so I'll expand on it. There's a lot of technology solutions out there and leaders who have hung their hats on this AI thing. And it is good when used properly. And it is a maturity of something that has existed since the beginning. And I think that's the misnomer, is that people think that this is all something brand new. It's not new. What is new is the speed and the ability to access more components of usable, reliable data in order to help improve both the employee and customer experience. So when people come in and companies come in and say, we have the best AI system. Well, what do you do that makes you so much better? How are you doing it? They talk about language models and engineering. And I actually went and took 6 months to get an AI engineering certification because I wanted to know what everybody was talking about. And it turns out that, it's a really awesome query. What it is, it's the if-thens when you go down, like when, it's not a mature IVR, but you think about if this is said, what can happen? What are the propensities or the statistical reasoning why what's the next step kind of thing? So you're using statistics to predict what is going to happen, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to eliminate your agents. And to think that it eliminates your need for your agents that's what keeps me up. It doesn't. What it does is it allows you to eliminate the simple things so that you can improve your agents or your employees and elevate their skill base and their knowledge so that when they get that customer coming through after they've tried the simple things, that they're not going to spend 30 minutes trying to work through something. They're ready because they've been elevated and they're more knowledgeable. It's going to cost more. Everybody thinks that it doesn't. It is going to cost more. But you know what you get in return is you get a customer who's not going to churn. You get agents that aren't going to attrite. You get to keep that long-term, valuable, revenue-generating relationship. And so for me, that keeps me up at night, is getting that message out and evaluating. This is part of what I do, evaluate the vendors who say they deliver. I'm working with a customer or company as an advisor, an executive advisor called Gig CX Talent, and their sister company, Borderless. And one of the things that me and one of my partners are doing is evaluating the technology to, and I'm going to use Daniel's words, to inspect what we expect from the vendors, whether they be solution providers or people providers. Are you doing what it is you're saying that you're doing? Where does that measure on the scale of perfection? Which, you're not going to get to, but how close to that do you get? So it keeps me up at night when people are buying all this technology and don't know what they're buying and don't understand why it's not doing what they think it's supposed to do, because they weren't given the expertise to understand what it was really meant to do for both the customer and the agents. And that's the other thing, is that the agent experience is just as valuable. So when you think about them now getting information fed to them to help them answer a question, instead of them having to say, "1 moment, please," or "Can you hold 1 moment, please, while I look that up?" Now it's being fed to them. That's the beauty of being able to make sure that you have all this good data. And that's the other thing. Make sure you have the good data. They all think that they have everything in the background until they find out they have 5 different knowledge systems that are out there that all say 5 different things, and you're giving the customer 5 different answers. No.
Right. So what keeps you up really is that the impact to these businesses buying this technology and the wrong expectations being set,
Mhm.
and that's essentially, when it all boils down, that's what's keeping you up right now.
Yeah, because it's not
Okay.
really improving the customer experience. It's not really improving the agent experience, and you're not getting what it is that you expect. So it's trying to get in front of them before um, the vendors who are the suppliers who are, saying, "Here, get this one because it's the least amount," or "Here, we do this better," and they're given a sales story and not really the real story of what they need to achieve that. So a lot of assessment work that we do, I mean, together even, is making sure that they're ready for that. And when you tell them they're not too thrilled. But
We're
do you want to fail or do you want to succeed? So how to give that message without being so blunt, that's part of the thing that keeps me up at night, because I'm very direct and I have to learn not to be sometimes.
Sometimes people don't want to hear that
Mhm.
their baby's ugly. I mean, funny
Right.
enough,
Go
but
figure.
sometimes it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Just needs a little plastic
Well,
surgery. We can fix that.
yeah, just a little. In some
Right.
cases, a whole lot.
Right.
But um,
Oh, the
so
stories I
this
can
is
tell.
actually so this is actually a really good lead in to the next
Hmm.
question, which is, I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball,
Okay.
and tell me, over the next 5 years, people, technology, how do you see the contact center and customer experience world evolve? Or, yeah, let's just stick with evolve. I know
Okay.
5 years doesn't feel like an evolutionary time, but in our world, it is.
It is. Everything that goes around comes around in our world, and every 5 years you see a return. You see a change. If
Yeah.
you have been here long enough, for me, I'm coming up on 35 years of doing this on and off. I mean, I'm free to admit, I was young. I shared that. So it's like, when you see this happen every 5 years, it's almost predictable. So of course, the new flavor, the new letters are out there, like it was once upon a time. What's the flavor of the month? It's strawberry this month, it's chocolate that month. It's the same thing. I think that here is my personal opinion. I think that AI is going to lose its luster, and only a few are going to come out on top that actually deliver what it is that they say they deliver in the way they do it, and they stay in their lane. So when you stay in your lane and you become an expert at what you do, you can achieve excellence. And trying to do it all is not going to be okay. And that's what I see a lot of. So it's like, when you're working with AI, are you going to work with agentic AI, or are you going to work with the customer side of AI? Which one is it? And which one's going to be your better one And how are you going to blend the second one in there? So I think that I personally believe that there are about 3 out there that do that magnificently. That aside, I expect to see the quality of things start to change dramatically, because they're figuring out that the automatic analysis done on context as they're happening and after they're happening allows the people out there to be able to see what really is the root cause of issues. And they haven't really taken the quality side of things to be, hey, it doesn't matter if you say Mrs. Jones 4 times. What matters is what's the problem. And so I think they're starting to use that more to fix the service and the products. So you're seeing a whole group that's not getting recognized of automated analysis at the quality level, where it's happening, and it can work with the agent then and interject and say, this is what it is that you need to help this person with right then. So you don't have the attrition and you don't have the churn. That's where I see it separating into 2 different worlds. And I see a few that are going to be on top and some that aren't. The other thing is that there's a large SMB market right now and an enterprise. And there's a little bit of large in the middle of that. The suppliers are starting to find out you can't always get the big whales. They're also figuring out that the large guys usually have their favorites. So you have these bunch of little SMB market down here, but they're less than 50 seats. What's funny is they're the ones that are changing the world, because they're using technology different now. So I see some of them starting to separate their deliveries too into that. In 5 years, it's going to be part of every contact solution is going to automatically have this automatic analysis component, and the data is going to be used to actually solve the root cause at the product and service level and not at the customer level. That's what I predict is going to happen. And that everybody's going to stop being afraid of analysis paralysis and actually use the data the way it needs to be used, because data tells the story every single time.
We were talking about that. Yeah, data doesn't lie. And you can manipulate it. You can certainly make it look like whatever bias you happen to have, but if you agnostically look at it,
Right.
Data doesn't lie.
Yeah, that's the key.
Interesting. So all this talk in the hyperscalers and the big model builders of ASI, and the speed at which all this stuff is coming, you don't see any of that. Do you think that's all kind of peripheral and that won't impact us in the same way that they're referring to the rest of the market?
No, because I think as consumers, we're getting smarter. And by consumers, I mean not just people who are using these products and services. I mean consumers of the technology are getting smarter and understanding that, wait a minute, it isn't a pie in the sky that's going to do these things. That's what I'm trying to help continue to educate, not saying I'm the one doing it, but as I'm talking to folks, they are saying, yeah, I'm starting to see that it really isn't everything. Let's look at Salesforce. The Salesforce CEO comes out and says, this isn't what you think it is, right? And he was the first one that coined the phrase collective data analysis, because that's really what you're doing, and you're using that to better your performances, right? So I see, as people are coming out saying, oh, we can do this and we can eliminate that and we're going to make this robotic, and it's like, oh no, wait, we're not going to be Skynet, and this is not the Terminator. We're not turning anything on like that, no. Yes, there are appropriate uses, and don't go too far, because change is scary. And like it or not, there's a lot of conservative people out there that don't want to change. So I don't see that in the next 5 years. I see it getting a lot of hype and then questioned and tested and questioned again. And the 5 whys will start being a normal thing again. Why are you doing that? Why has that happened? Why am I going to get that? What am I going to, you have to drill down. And I think that getting smarter is making that happen, and making sure that we speak about it, talk about it, share your insights and thoughts, their opinions. If you don't like somebody's opinion, look for another one. If you don't agree with it, figure out why. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just
be
how I think
open.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, a person that's willing to change their mind based upon data and insights and research
Hmm.
to, just shows intelligence, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm very convicted as you are, about certain things in my life,
Hmm.
but um, when it comes to this stuff, we're all
Right.
learning. I mean, quite frankly, Transformers first came out in 2018,
Right.
so, and I'm not talking the movies for those people
Right.
watching. Uh, if you don't know what that is,
Look it
look it
up.
up.
Learn.
2018 Google memo, memo, whatever you want to call it. I
Whatever.
mean,
Right.
yeah,
Wikipedia.
um,
Go wherever you want to go. Do it.
yeah.
But you're
But
right.
I mean, that's what it. I think
Just
we're
a second.
all
You
kind of
froze for a
trying to
second,
figure this
Fred.
out, right?
Yeah.
Where it's going to land. I've heard a lot of
Hmm.
opinions. The one thing I've seen is proof that the modern LLMs combined with good prompt tools, proper security, design, architecture, can definitely work. And they do.
Yes.
I mean, it's already been shown.
Right.
90+% capture, and containment with
Hmm.
higher NPS CSAT scores. We've seen it.
Which is going
Now
to keep
that's
your
not
customers.
norm.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's not. They understand audiences. That's not norm.
No.
That is an extreme situation where somebody invested a lot of time, effort, and resources into getting it right and moving from, that 25 to 40 to 50 to 60. And as you start to get up in the higher law of large numbers, the higher the percentage of accuracy or containment, the harder it is. Every 1 point above 90 is really hard. The
Really
first
hard.
80 is always really easy comparatively to the last 20. So, but I mean, that's the way computer science has been forever. That last 20% is always hard. And this is the same. So interesting. Somebody who spent. I love that. Even though you've spent all of this time learning and re-educating and continuing to dive in and look at the products, you still see 5 years. You're not seeing huge changes. Yeah,
It again, it will hit a point and then start over and it'll be a new tag. There'll be a new
yeah,
name for an old horse.
yeah. Well, I mean, we used to do text to speech, speech to text. Now we're NLU, NLPs.
Right. And
And
some of the things that AI companies really need to think about is the large language model, the language models, and they bring them and say, this is what you're going to get, as opposed to allowing customers who understand and are educated to say, wait, I need mine. And they're like, oh no, we have the best. Well, for you, I want to use that. Yes, but I want to be able to, add to it. I want to be able to make it more mine. I want to change that voice that's actually speaking so it's more brand related. And that is going to be the differentiator that happens a lot. So
yeah,
in
yeah,
five
and we're
years, I can
seeing that.
see,
I mean,
yeah. And
voice tonality.
mhm,
We're seeing those things already start to be
right,
deployed. I think what you're hitting on though is a conversation I've been having with a lot of people, including the technology suppliers, is the big question between PLLMs versus
hmm,
open models
right,
versus build by partner. I think for the first time ever, I am questioning. I've always been a big believer that 99% of the people out there should not build their own. Especially when it came to contact center, this, and I know
hmm,
this, but you're talking the average CCAS platform has 5 to 10,000 features,
right,
that in different variations can have completely different outcomes. So to build a competitive product that can get you, 80, 85, 90% there for a company is really hard, but then to build, maintain ongoing development. Well, the world has now shifted, and I think our industry is going to continue to have this conversation for a while.
yeah,
It's the answer's not clear. For a little while, I was like, well, with the new code writing tools, I mean, the basics, maybe people could build. And I was like, well, not really, because you still have all of this understanding and data and architecture. You still got to build it for support purposes and ongoing maintenance. And I mean, if you build software, you got to be a software company. You may have a division that runs your software stack like a software company, but you still need that. You still need support and DevOps, and you still need all the people that continue to build on it and create new versions. That's not cheap.
No, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I was going to say no, and a top of that is if you make it overcomplicated, then it becomes too difficult, and the defects are huge. I don't want to say keep it stupid simple, but keep it simply simple. If you notice that, with some of the providers out there, let's talk CCAS, some of them have this beautiful toy that you have to take 6 years of engineering school to learn how to use or to program. But if you go for a year, you can use 5%, and the 5% is good enough. And actually is more advanced than what 100% of something else was. So it's like, don't overbuild, don't overcomplicate. It is a simple process. It really is not difficult, and it's not rocket science. And so, but I think you have to know where you've been to know where you're going. And a lot of that tribal knowledge is starting to retire and come out and go away. And so what's going to happen when if you think about it, there's a gap of generations. When you go to a conference now, there's a gap of generations. There's us old G's, and then there's all these new guys. But there's not very much in between, which means there's a whole generation in there that has no clue. Now, the good thing is the younger ones are actually asking the questions. And that's what I would put out to anybody who is starting out in this journey and has chosen to take on this very unique skill set, is ask people who have been there. How did you do it? What did you do? What was your mindset? What can I learn for you? Reach out and get mentors, even if it's just to bounce ideas off, because it's going to make a difference when this is a generation that never knew about a rotary phone or plugging in, cables to get phone contacts to go from point A to point E. You talk about, I mentioned to somebody about a T1. They said, what is that? And I was like, well, it had 23 channels of voice and 1 channel of data. What do you do with that? Answer a call. I mean, it's like, so yeah, they don't have T1s now, but they also don't have stuff sitting out there in the clouds doing nana land. You have to understand data centers actually do have cables that plug into each other, because it still is in a server, in a spot, in a cage, in a data center, and somebody is plugging it into something. It just doesn't magically appear.
Yeah. Yeah. The cloud is just someone else's server. I mean,
Exactly.
in the end.
In the end,
just
it's somebody else's house. Yeah. So,
yeah. Yep.
And it's cheaper sometimes to have it in somebody else's house. But, then you say, well, can I have my own space in there? Oh, yeah, sure. You can buy your own space. It's just not going to be in your house. And that's fine. But to think that this is all wireless and happening like Willy Wonka is moving a child across space, that's not real. That's not how it works.
No. So you just answered my third question,
Yeah.
which was, any words for anybody getting into the space? Find a mentor, ask good questions, spend some time and get to know, us gray hairs. For those of us that have gray hair,
Right? Or hair.
Yeah. Or hair, for that matter. We do have values still.
Yeah,
we're not dinosaurs.
There's a reason why that's the way it is. Our brains have done all this thing. No, I think it's very important, and not just the smart questions. Ask any question. Ask all the questions. Ask why. Go down the old school 5 whys. Think about data back in, I know everybody's agile and we want to move fast and do all this great stuff. Great. But if you don't document it and don't have anything to prove it and there's no data behind it, how do you know it's real? It's phony.
Yeah.
Monies. Prove it. So you do have to do some digging and become a nerd every once in a while. And I love my nerd side as well as my peacock side, as I like to say. It's, operations is fun. Being a nerd helps you understand why operations needs and does what they do and how you can enhance that, not control it.
One thing, and I'm going to bounce this off of you because I've been
Sure.
actually really intrigued how I think artificial intelligence, whether they want it or not, is actually going to force the silos to break.
Right.
Finally, there's something. I mean, because whether no matter what you believe about the future of AI, every board, every C-suite is pushing down projects. And the contact center is, I mean, I've talked about this for, a long time, the tip of the spear. We have the most structured and unstructured data. We're used to the technology of text to speech, speech to text, IVRs, routes, logic. I mean, we've been doing this stuff forever. The first time I ever heard about KPIs, long before the first business book ever published, was in a contact center,
Yep.
right? Or in a call center.
What's your speed to answer? What's your handle time?
Yeah. What's your percentage of close rate if you're in the outbound?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, my question to you is: do you see that same thing happening at the ground level? Is finally IT and operations coming to the same table to talk about these technologies, or are we still fighting that same battle?
I think we're still fighting the battle. However, it is getting better. That was something that I pride myself on in not only my days at Bank of America, but through my career after I got to that level, was making sure that you brought, when I was on the tech side, operations in there, and when I was on operations, bring tech in, because you cannot succeed. One cannot succeed without the other, no matter how much they want to think they're separate and complete, and they're not. You have to have that. You need to also have a person or some peoples in there who knows how to translate their language, because it's very different. And they may think they're saying, I love it when people from operations come in and start using vernacular they heard from technology and think that what they're saying is what they mean. And then they get what they ask for, and it's not anything that they mean. So another key thing I would tell to anybody out there is learn to translate the vernacular for the audience. If you're talking to operations, understand how to take nerd and speak to them and whatever. But one of the things I've done, back to what I was saying in my career, is I've always brought them together. And in my own business, in my partnership business I had, and back again in my own business, it's always bringing them both to the table. Somebody may ask at one or the other at the high level, this is what we think we want to do, or this is what the problem statement is. And you can give that and put a little wrap around it, but do not tie that bow until both people are at the table and can actually hash it out and understand, because there's more than one way to skin these cats. And not one way is always better than another. And there may be gaps that you don't foresee because you don't have all the people at the table putting their input in. Shut the door, take your shoes off, and let the language fly to make sure that everybody is on the same page, right, wrong, or indifferent. That is absolutely required, and it is in infancy. But it in the next 5 years, my hope is that that goes away. That separation of thought and not understanding that they have to be together. They may have two different focuses, but they're never going to achieve it alone.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to watch this. Yeah, I mean, you and I go back far enough. Back in the premise days, IT owned the buy. They own the purse strings because it was their server rack, their punch down blocks, their T1s. They own the buy. And the operations team was that influencer that just ticked the box, right? Does this fit? Does this technology, is it going to solve for my operations the best they could, right? Cloud, let's say cloud 1.5, pretty much the operators got the purse strings. and they made the decisions, and IT became the checkbox, right? The influencer. Yes, the APIs look good. Yes, the security protocols pass, or we can work with these guys. And now with AI, it's reverting back to IT holding the purse strings. And and operations is being brought in secondarily, so much so that it's not uncommon now to see operations start a project and then find out later that IT is already down the road and already looking at products.
Right.
So it's almost like, like we talked about before, with everything being cyclical, this is another cycle in which, this technology, is getting forced back in the hands of IT. And IT is now driving the decision. So that means ops needs to stand back up and get a seat at the table. Otherwise, IT is going to end up telling you one day that your whole system is being replaced, then you haven't even looked at it.
Right. And that's where it needs to go back to like the charter days. And where you come together and again, sometimes we did things that were really smart for a really good reason. And when you think about the charter days, and it was like, okay, we have this idea. Sorry, I need to plug in. We have this idea and this is how we want it to work. And you work with, your technology team. Oh, now you're going to see me get up, everybody. Sorry. This is how it works. See, IT. And you work with them to find out how best to, it didn't cut out. How best to solve a problem is you have to have an idea and you have to share the idea. So I think back to when charters were big and this is my problem. This is what I want. I don't know what solution is going to give me that. Let's work together to figure that out. And this is what the benefits are that I need to get from this. So we need to work together to make that happen. That went away for a while. That needs to come back. And it needs to come back under a really strong, the ideation of steering committees. I don't care if you have 5 people in your office or 5,000 or 500,000. You still need a body that looks at these things together and understands prioritization and what really matters, because the C's want the money. They want to be successful. They want the money. They really don't care how you get it. And so, yes, you want to say, hey, there's ways to do this to the C levels to meet your goals, but they don't want to get into the weeds of understanding that, but other people have to. And they have to do that in a partnership, because if IT comes in and says, I'm going to give you AI, and operations says, but our communication plan doesn't include those questions. Why are you asked? Why'd you put that in there? You didn't even ask us. Now our quality system changes. Now our process changes. Then it's going to cause more friction. Don't work together.
Yeah. And, the sad reality is companies are going to go through this. The boards and the C levels, they're pushing this for a reason. They believe there's a reason driving this need. I think when I'm thinking about if I was to run a contact center again, and I went back down that route in, my old days, if I was sitting there trying to figure out what's my next move and it wasn't AI, if I'm not the one leading it, they're going to replace me with somebody
Exactly.
who will. So this is not a question of if you do it.
It's when.
It's when and how. Yeah.
And how. And the how is just as important as the when and the what. And that's the super key to this. And, we touched on it. It's like when you did routing, we all learned how to do old school. If this is that, then go here and, go to step 42. If customer press 1 or collect number, whatever. It's the same thing. If customer comes in, better know them. I'm going to say this out loud. Better know who's calling you. Irritates me when somebody from AI gives me a demo and says, and your name is. No, you should know who I am. You can use biodeterminations. You can use a combination of things. If you don't know who's calling you, that's a problem. And once you've authenticated them and you don't continue to know that and carried on, that's a problem. That's a root cause thing there. AI can only answer that and help that if you teach it that. And you have to have the data to teach it that. If IT puts it in and says, well, they asked that question now, I don't want to ask that question now. I don't want you to ask me that question. I want you to know who I am, why I'm here, because you know what I've been through and what I could possibly want based on what my relationship with you is, whether it's new or 50 years old.
Yeah. And companies aren't there.
No.
They're getting there though. I mean, there's no doubt. Yes, there's some that have heavily invested. I think, like you said, it's more the mid-market that are a lot more agile, a lot more. They've got their tech change management in place. They've been doing this stuff. They've been advancing and pushing the envelope. Those people, they're there.
They're the game changers, which is and those
which
are
means
who need to be marketed to because and listened to because they're the ones who had to be nimble and careful in their approach because they didn't have unlimited funds and didn't have, these other avenues to be able to go down. They have to be educated and engaged and inclusive and be able to say, this is exactly what we need and how, and I need you to deliver that to me and not get sunshine blown up their behinds because it's not, all it's going to do is cause 10 other people or 10 other companies to know how horrible it was.
Yeah, and that still holds true. And actually, I think it's larger. It used to be, one person had a bad experience, they tell 10. Now one person has a bad experience, they post it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and next thing you know, you're talking about.
Look at there's a perfect example. There's a movie star right now, who I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to get the subpoena, who is out subpoenaing TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and everything else because of bad press or bad people saying bad things. We're talking millions of dollars, right? And so, if somebody doesn't like something you do and it goes out all over the place, what are you going to do? That movie star's in a world of hurt only because they don't like what's being said. It's the same thing in business.
Yeah. Well, one last question.
Sure.
If you could pick, one or two people that you think I should have on as a guest, who would you love to hear them share their journey, their story, and join us on here?
Okay. I'm going to say, my first one's going to say is Valerie McSorley. And I will tell you her journey through what she did before COVID and how she developed some of the programs that still exist today, what she did through COVID and how she had to reinvent herself afterwards and what she's doing now. Phenomenal story of reinvention, success, and perseverance. She absolutely, I would love for her to share her story. Another one is Sanus, the leaders in Sanus.
Okay.
Because of their evolution. So one of the engineers, I believe his name is Roberto. He'll kill me if I forgot Raul, sorry. His story is very interesting as well. And then a third one I'm just going to throw out. If you haven't talked to Milan or Mark, always do that. Milan's reinventing himself again too. And Mark is just a person that is dear to my heart. And the other ones you already have. So that's what I would say.
And the good news is I know all of them,
right?
Because we obviously swim in the same circle. So,
we do.
Don't
make anybody mad in this circle, right? If you make somebody mad, everybody's going to know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
Thank you for joining me. We'll obviously get this out to everybody, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Thank you for everybody who've joined and watched. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, and thank you so much for understanding that I had to plug in my laptop because I wasn't proactive. So appreciate the little takeaway. And thank you, Fred. This was really a lot of fun. I always have a good time talking with you anyway. So take care.
Thanks.